Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Downright Upright Show, the place to go to hear out loud and proud what Minnesotans are thinking. And I am your host, Philip Anthony. And thank you for choosing to join us today, and I'm hoping you're doing fantabulous. Are you doing fantabulous?
Oh, I'm doing great today. It's good to be on your podcast, Philip. I know we've been helping you out with some of these for the past few months. Now I get to be a guest on
and
it.
Now you get to be a guest.
It's going to be
and
fun.
I am so honored to have you here. Thank you. My special guest, more than special guest, is Brett Johnson, radio personality, announcer, podcaster, and wearer of many hats for AM950. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now I'd imagine our listeners would like to know a little bit about you and about your beginnings. So would you explain to us or tell us where you were born and raised and went to school and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, so I spent the early part of my childhood growing up in the Los Angeles area. I was about like 7 years old. And
see,
then,
I never knew that.
Yeah, started out there, in California for a while, early childhood. Then Dad got a job back in Minnesota, so that's how I ended up here, probably when I was about like 7 or 8 years old. And then if you fast forward a little bit, went to college at Augsburg University, got a degree in accounting of all things.
Accounting?
Yes, accounting, yeah.
So you're a numbers guy?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I got that job right as the Great Recession was coming into play, 2008, the fall. Landed a job just before then, but unfortunately, as you know, the economy completely crashed during that time.
The end of Bush's term, I guess?
Yeah, coincidentally, right at the end of Bush's term. Who would have think that he would have tanked the economy? But
well, of course. Republicans never do that.
Yeah, exactly. So I ended up getting laid off from the firm that I was working at immediately out of college. So in the meantime, what I was trying to do is to get my CPA. And what's kind of weird, at least back then, I'm not sure how it is now, is that you needed about an extra year of schooling to take the CPA exam. Mm-hmm. But the loophole I found is that it could be in literally any topic. It didn't have to be accounting. So I figured, people have told me for years, you have a good radio voice, why don't you do something with that? So I thought, all right, I'll get that extra year, or however much it was, in radio school. So I went to Brown College and ended up really liking that and switching gears pretty much completely from there. So once I ended up leaving Brown, I got a job at a small radio station in Iowa called KJAN, Atlantic, Iowa, about halfway between Omaha and Des Moines. Hosted an afternoon show there for a few years. That was more of kind of the way I would describe KJAN, it would be like WCCO if they played music as well. Very much, like a small town information station. So
you spun records too and stuff like that, or?
Fortunately, I was a little past the time where they were spinning records and still having to cut tape when it comes to audio. Yeah, literally just like a few years after that, which it would have been a fun skill to learn, but also, as I've heard, incredibly annoying. Where right now, like you're recording on a digital recorder, 10, 15 years ago, you would have to actually use tape and try to manually cut it up with all sorts of tools, and not very fun. So yeah.
So if I was to look at your podcast, what would you call that? Spotify? Is that where that people play music now?
Yeah, Spotify, Apple Podcasts,
Did
Googles.
you have any songs you want to listen to?
Oh, I didn't do any songs or I didn't make any music myself, unfortunately. No.
But do you listen to music now? Are you a
Oh yeah. Oh, I definitely listen to Spotify. Yeah. I have my Spotify playlists. I like the random ones that they kind of create for you. Normally,
do you?
if I hear an artist I like, favorite them on there, and then Spotify.
What genre would you say?
I don't know. I'm pretty open to just about anything. Yeah, I like a lot of classic stuff too. Even going. Trying to think. Well, obviously, I'm a kid of the late 90s, early 2000s, so kind of that era as well.
Oh, okay.
But yeah.
Awesome. So what event in your early years do you believe formulated your political beliefs that you have today? Because I would guess you're a little left of center, are you?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, left of center. So the way I got started in politics was that my grandmother had been very active within the Republican Party. For years and years. She was active, I think even going back to like the 1950s. And she was part of a different faction of Republicans that don't exist anymore. I would call them probably progressive Republicans, which sounds like a misnomer right now, but that was really a thing. If you look at the tradition of like
a moderate Republican.
Yeah, like Arnie Carlson or Dave Durenberger, former senator from Minnesota. No, not even Pawlenty, like Nelson Rockefeller
Oh,
from,
that kind. Okay.
yeah, that kind, yeah. So she was very active for years. She would be a delegate at just about every national convention, but things started to change, especially about the time when Clinton came into office. She started getting a little disillusioned with the Republican Party, especially over the religious issues and also abortion. She was very much a pro-choice person.
Oh,
And then by the time Bush came into office, she had completely had it with the Republican Party and was done. And that was kind of about my time when I was eligible to vote and started paying attention to politics. I remember she would always call all of her grandkids on election day saying, make sure you're going out to vote. Not necessarily saying who to vote for, but
right,
she was
right.
one of the people that got me kind of inspired to get into politics as one of the people. The other person that got me inspired to get into politics is a guy who's our current state senator, Steve Swazinski. He's in, I forgot the district number now with redistricting. I think he used to be 48, which is like Eden Prairie and Minnetonka.
Okay.
But he was a high school government teacher at Eden Prairie High School, where I went to school. And my senior year, he was my government teacher. That was a class that we would take there. And he did a great job not only teaching how government works, how politics works, he did a great job at doing it from a nonpartisan perspective. Where one of the things I remember, he would ask everyone at the end of the year, if you think I'm a liberal, sit on this side of the classroom. If you think I'm a conservative, sit on the other side. And generally, it would always be about 50-50 every year.
Wow.
Now, of course, fast forward, we know he's obviously a Democrat now who's serving in the state Senate, but he was one of the people that also got me inspired and really interested into politics because he put kind of a human face on it and how it really impacts people in their everyday life. So I would say those two people are what really got me involved. Obviously, my grandmother, and then taking that government class from Swazinski back in high school.
Was there any issue that also catapulted you into, your interest in politics? For example, like, for me, it was obviously LGBT rights, being a gay man myself. I have friends that always said it was abortion. Now I think, in my opinion, if you were to ask me that question, if you're gonna turn it around, I would say, democracy. That's a big one for me. I mean, because fascism is creeping up on us very slowly, and I don't know if people get that, And I mean, is that also a factor for you?
Yeah, well, nowadays, of course, democracy is absolutely my biggest motivating factor, where I don't even care if you're a Republican or Democrat. If you're at least for democracy, won't
Yeah.
necessarily be all the way behind you like a Liz Cheney or someone like that, but I can at least respect that and think, if you're
Exactly.
going to lose, I'd rather have you lose to a Democrat than another crazy Republican in a primary, like what we just saw happen the other day with that person who beat her. But for me, what got me interested in politics, so again, this is back in like the early 2000s, early Bush era. A few things really got me into politics and really leaning more towards the progressive side rather than the conservative side. One, obviously the war, which was happening back then with the Iraq War. I was very much against that. Of course, as you're probably well familiar with, Bush was also one of the people who really started to embrace that religious right and that overreach of kind of forcing religious values on other people. I was definitely not into that as well. And then another issue that got me into it as well is just the idea that we need universal health care and single-payer health insurance. Because for me, I have a physical disability called arthrogryposis. I wear leg braces, and I know it hasn't so much impacted me, but I know lots of friends who are also from the disabled community that have a lot of trouble being able to afford the health care and the health insurance that they need. So those are really the three main issues that got me into politics, were just the idea of healthcare, being against the war, and then religious overreach that we saw from the right.
Yeah, and Republicans really don't talk about health care at all. I mean, to them, it's a non-issue. I mean, they actually wanted to get rid of, the little health care that we got from Obamacare, which was a little drop in the bucket. I mean, it's better than nothing. I mean, they can't throw you off your insurance now, and you can, and if you're a 26-year-old, you can, still be on your parents' health care. Those are drops in the bucket. They even wanted to get rid of that.
And that was a lifesaver for me now that you bring up the fact that you could stay on your parents' health insurance until you were 26, because that took effect just as I was about turning 26. And
Okay.
I'll be honest with you here, working small town radio in Iowa doesn't exactly pay a ton of money, and you don't get benefits either.
Right,
So
yeah.
that was super helpful to be able to stay on my parents' health insurance until I was 26 years old. So yeah, I forgot where we were going with that. Oh yeah, you were talking about healthcare and the fact that Republicans largely don't care about it. And
It's not. Well, I don't know if they don't care about it. Or it's not really an issue.
right.
It's not something because every time you bring up healthcare, they say, well, let's just be able to take your insurance over state lines. I mean, that's their only answer I've ever heard. Which to me, how is that going to really lower healthcare that much to the point where it's affordable for everyone, right?
Yeah, and they just like having the government boogeyman out there. I mean, you can even go back to Reagan he was even advocating against Medicare in the 60s, where he said, well, liberal, I can't do a Ronald Reagan impression, but he essentially was saying that, well, people who are socialists, the first step they're going to have is to put government between you and your doctor. And obviously that scared a lot of people into thinking, oh, I don't want the government in my health care. Well,
and the Republicans are doing that now with abortion. They're getting between the doctor and the woman. So it's crazy. Anyway, so when did you become part of the AM950 family, and how did you get the gig? Did it just come up, or did you meet somebody?
Yeah, it's kind of funny you mentioned that. So at the time when I started working here, it was, I think, late 2015, right around in that time. Or at that point, I had moved back from Iowa. I had started my own business with a business partner of mine. We still do this occasionally, where we're out like streaming different events for amateur sports teams, whether it's high school or college, or we'll do like kind of TV style broadcasts. Kind of a side note. So I was doing that as kind of a part-time gig, as well as getting back into accounting and doing some contract work. So at that point, back in 2015, I had always been a fan of AM950, I think even going back to, like the Bush years. And I saw that they had an open position for someone to be a board op on weekends. And I thought, oh, that'd be a fun thing to do as kind of a hobby. So that's exactly what I did, applied for the job. And for about a year or two, I just was pretty much board opping on weekends, maybe working once or twice every month or so.
Were you like an apprentice at the beginning?
It was just someone, not necessarily an apprentice, just very part-time person where, we sometimes here at AM950 have live shows that run on the weekends. Okay. So we'll bring in a producer that will run the board and everything for them. So,
okay.
Yeah, that's how I got into at least working for AM950. And then about a year or two later, after I had started there was some staff turnover at the station where they were then looking for a full-time person. And pretty much that's how I fell into the job, where it was originally just something that was going to be a hobby. And then once Chad called me up and said, hey, we're looking for a full-time person at this point, I decided to take the job and step out of accounting.
Do you enjoy being in front, on the air more, or behind the scenes more? What's your bailiwick? Is that the word?
I think we'll go with that. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. What's your jam?
It's actually much more behind the scenes, even though I can certainly host, when I can, and I enjoy being behind the mic occasionally. Really, I'm a behind-the-scenes type of guy, and that even goes to my background, running my own business right now, where I'm out streaming stuff, where I'm running stuff in the background. I usually bring in, like, contract announcers and that type of thing. I've always been a behind-the-scenes person. I love the technology part of it, seeing how things work, and, if you give me a challenge saying, hey, we want video of something, I'll try to find a way to make it work. So that's really where I think my passion is when it comes at least to my work in the broadcasting business, is that I can do some stuff in front of the mic or camera, but I'm mostly kind of a behind-the-scenes kind of guy, where I really like doing.
Well, I'm just with this podcast, it's kind of like being a fledgling podcaster. I'm learning the technological aspects of the job, because there are a lot of things. I mean, you and I have been. I've been sending you a lot of my podcasts so that you can post them. And at the beginning, I didn't even know how to combine files and put them as an MP4. So you've been really instrumental in helping with that. So thank you with that. And because I thought you just basically record the show and it's done. It's not.
If only it were that easy, right?
It was only that easy. Yep. So getting back to the on the air stuff that you've done, who was the most memorable? I can't say that word. Memorable person you interviewed, and while you were here at AM950, and why? Like,
Oh man, I got to think back to some of the people I've interviewed
because
over
you've
the years.
interviewed quite a few people.
Yeah, it's at least been a good 3 years total of me interviewing people. I'm trying to think.
Was it a politician? Was it a
Yeah, definitely the
entertainment?
politicians. Swadzinski, who I mentioned earlier, I've interviewed him a few times. That's someone I've enjoyed speaking to. I'm trying to think of anyone else. A few years ago, actually, I did have a chance to interview Dave Durenberger about his book, When Republicans Were Progressive. I'm trying to think when this was. Yeah, this was when I think he first released the book a number of years ago, and I enjoyed talking with him kind of about the history of the Republican Party and how it did kind of morph, especially like when Goldwater, back in '64 came to prominence, really started to move that party to the right from its very moderate beginnings or not moderate beginnings, but at least moderate roots that it had, back in the 50s and 40s, and how it really started drifting to the right and outside of the mainstream.
Do you think Gingrich was
Yes.
a major catalyst in changing the party, moving it to the right more?
I would say so. Probably even more so than Ronald Reagan. I think
Oh,
Newt
absolutely.
Gingrich, absolutely. I mean, he was the first guy that came in. Well, maybe not the first person who said we need to win at all costs, and convincing people that if someone's not in your political party, they're your enemy.
Yeah,
They're
oh,
not
yeah.
a political adversary.
Yep.
They're your enemy, and they need to be destroyed. And yeah, he was obviously someone who was ahead of his time when he knew how to work the media, work talk radio, even I read a book a few years ago about how he even took advantage of being on C-SPAN in the 80s and just, getting people fired up. So I'm absolutely with you that
Yeah.
he was really the firebrand.
Well, in my opinion, and opinions are, personal, but I think he was very damaging to the country because he made politics evil, like killed that, almost like
Right.
stop that person at any cost. Regardless of, if you don't agree with them, you have to make them your enemy, like you said. And that to me is dangerous. And I think I think not Ronald Reagan, but Donald Trump really pushed it to the nth degree now. I mean, because now he's just making Newt Gingrich look like a fairy godmother, it's like.
And the thing that's so frustrating about people like Newt Gingrich and Donald Trump is that they don't even necessarily have real political positions. As you were going back and talking about who was the favorite person you interviewed, actually you just jogged my memory and brought up a guy I interviewed named Julian Zelizer. He's a political writer who wrote a book specifically about the rise of Newt Gingrich and how he kind of led to, the rise of Donald Trump. And if you look at the real early history of Newt Gingrich, he was not that much of a far-right person. He was very much in favor of environmental protections. I wouldn't necessarily say he was a moderate, but he was certainly not an extremist. And then, when he gets in that mode of, now we just need to win at all costs, that's what it seems to be. It's not so much that he really believes in any of these causes, and I would put Trump in this same category. It's just all about winning. And Trump is the same way, where, I think I saw this a few weeks ago when that abortion ruling first came down. I think one of the publications I looked at said, Donald Trump thinks this will be privately a disaster for Republicans. And he was probably right about that. And in fact, I think if you look at his history, he's probably really a pro-choice person when you boil down to it. But
he's instrumental in why it's happening because he appointed
he needs
those
to win.
3 judges that he said, that's my litmus test to judges on the Supreme Court. And soon enough, we have these 3 people who literally overlooked precedent and said, it doesn't matter what 2 other courts said, and so I'm going to just do, we're going to do what we want because we're, a religious right bunch of people on the Supreme Court. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the fact that Merrick Garland, who was supposed to be on the Supreme Court, was overlooked by what's his name, Senator McConnell.
Yeah, good old Mitch.
Yeah, good old Mitch. We love Mitch. I'm being facetious.
Yeah, it always sounds like he's eating whenever he talks. Like his mouth is full.
Yeah, I know. He mumbles. He
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
speak clearly. Yeah. He turned around and just disregarded what the president at the time, Obama, said. I want this guy. This is, give him a hearing. They didn't even give him a hearing. And they said, oh, it's because it's, too close to the election. Well, then when Amy Coney Barrett was, it was literally like a month before the election, they chose. So there's all this lying and deceitfulness, and that's why we have, abortion was overturned because of three people that were, religious fundamentalists, if you ask me. And she's like, isn't she in some sort of a cult? It's not even a.
Yeah, she had some.
What's
I can't think of the name
Yeah,
of the
I can't
society
either.
that she was a part of for a while, but
Correct.
it definitely had some very right-wing views and kind of Handmaid's Tale kind of things too.
Yes, yeah, that's what I
It's like
heard. Yeah,
women
yeah.
need their traditional roles. Yeah, that's what she
It's
was.
not a traditional. She's not a traditional Catholic, from what I was
Mm-hmm.
reading. She's like this extreme, whatever, like you said.
Well, as long as you say you're going to overturn Roe versus Wade, I don't think they care. They'll say, "We'll put you on the court anyways."
Oh yeah, yeah. So, along with your duties as radio host and podcaster, you also are an announcer. Because when I was telling you before we started, when I'm driving in my car, I always hear you say, "Oh, today's weather is," and you sound like an amazing announcer. You have this great voice, and you give the listeners the weather reports and all the other shows that are coming up, and etc. Does that take just as much preparation as your other duties take, or do you do this pre-recorded, or explain to the listeners?
Yeah, so those weather forecasts that you hear are pre-recorded. So yeah, I'm not actually doing those live. That would that would be quite a bit of time if I was. But
so how do you? So let's just suppose today it's going to rain. Okay, how do you do that? Like, do you record that in the morning at home, or explain to the listeners?
Yes, we do record those in the morning, or sometimes even before we leave. If the weather looks pretty predictable, we'll just record the next day's weather until the next producer is in.
Oh,
so that's kind of how it works. And then the biggest challenge on those weather sometimes is getting those recorded in time, so then you can fit the sponsorship angle at the end as well. Where,
right.
Yeah,
because I always thought maybe you did you have a file that says, okay, thunderstorm today.
Oh yeah,
and you recorded that 10 years ago or something,
right.
And then you just push that button, and I don't know. I mean, I'm guessing, but
no, we do read them live, or not necessarily live, but as the weather forecast comes in, then we do just record those voiceovers manually. So.
And those old ones are just discarded, I guess.
Yep, they just get discarded into the.
So there's no files that you use that you repeat.
No, not necessarily.
That's what I thought, but what do I know?
No, it's a good. You're not the first person to ask about that.
Oh, really?
Because, you think I hear you doing weathers all the time. You're the weather guy on there. How does that work? No, so I'm glad you asked about that, because you're certainly not the first one to
I'm
have
sure
some
the
curiosity.
listeners are curious about that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And what other preparation do you do for if I'm sure you announce shows that are coming up and things like that. So is that what kind of preparation do you do for that, or is it pre-recorded as well?
So if we're talking some of our weekend shows that come on, they'll come in usually during the week. We have a few that do their shows live, but they'll mostly come in at various times throughout the week and pre-record their shows ahead of time. And we'll be on the other side of the glass. Well, it doesn't really work since we're on a podcast without video, but they're on the other side of the glass where I'm in there producing, running their bumper music, adjusting their microphone levels, and then getting everything edited to go over the airwaves. So that's kind of the behind-the-scenes stuff we do for some of our other
You're
pros.
just doing everything, basically.
Yeah. Wearer of many hats was accurate when you said that at the beginning.
Well,
yes.
That's totally accurate. Exactly. So you've done a few podcasts as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
With Patrick Coolican, especially. I think it was called the FYI Politics. Is that?
Yeah. So I did a show for about a year. During 2020, I hosted a weekday show here on AM950, called FYI Politics with Brett Johnson, where I was it was a not too different from yours, where about half of it was interviews, then half of it was kind of talking head as well, just analyzing the news of the day or whatever else was happening. And as you mentioned, Patrick Kulikan was one of the frequent guests that I had on the show.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not familiar, he is the editor-in-chief of a publication called the Minnesota Reformer. It's a great news publication that really covers news that you sometimes don't hear from mainstream publications, whether it's radio, TV, or even print media, or at least covering issues from a different angle. Like if you've been following a lot of the police misconduct that's been happening in Minneapolis, a lot of those stories were broken by the Minnesota Reformer, not like the mainstream print or radio or TV publications that you'll see in town. So,
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So going back to what we were talking about, so Patrick started that publication, I think right about the time I started the podcast. I happened to, just see it in one of the, industry emails I subscribe to saying, hey, there's this new news publication starting in Minnesota. And I better check this thing out because, unfortunately, a lot of our news sources are going by the wayside, especially locally based ones now. So let's check out what these guys are all about. I enjoyed reading what they were writing and emailed Patrick and said, hey, would you be willing to come on for, I think we started it as maybe like a monthly interview, but then,
That's how easy it was just to get him to come on? Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
You just emailed him and you said,
just kind
like
of
to be on the show?
Yeah. Like to promote the Reformer, some of the news articles you guys are working on, and if you want to shoot me every week, or at that point every month, 3 or 4 big articles that you guys are working on, we can certainly talk through those, get those promoted, and hopefully make sure people are subscribing to the Minnesota Reformer and supporting it. So, we started it off just doing it as a monthly interview, then it became a weekly interview with Patrick, and even though I don't do FYI Politics with Brett Johnson anymore, it's still a part of the Matt McNeil Show, which I help out with, where I'll still talk to Patrick every Tuesdays at about 4:30 p.m.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I never knew that. I thought see, this is why we have podcasts, so people learn. Mm-hmm. I always thought that you were his friend or something, that you just decided, let's just get together and do this. But you just reached out to him, and he was kind enough to respond and do that. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I had interviewed lots of other journalists in town, so maybe there's like some sort of a, consortium of journalists.
How I got started with this was I met you,
right,
and Chad, and I believe also Matt at the Blue State Ball many years ago.
Yes, I remember that too. Yeah,
we used to, and I used to go yearly, and I enjoyed it. I think it's great. I mean, it's a great way for fellow liberals. I hate that word, liberal. Progressives, I guess, is the new term, right? What do we use now? Progressive liberal.
I like liberal.
Well, I'm 62, so we said liberal back in the day.
Yeah, that got turned into a dirty word for a while.
Yeah, right?
Thankfully, it's coming back, I at least think.
Yeah, what's wrong with liberal? Liberal means you believe in liberty.
Yeah, I remember when they used to say Paul Wellstone was too liberal for Minnesota back in those campaign commercials. Fortunately, no one says that now.
Yeah. And I don't know. I like either one.
Yeah.
Either one is fine with me.
Absolutely,
But the Blue State Ball, are we going to keep doing that, or are you?
Yeah, that should be coming back. I'll tell you. Well, I'll give you a couple inside scoops here on the on your podcast. So,
you will.
Yeah, we should have the Blue State Ball coming back maybe this year. I'm hoping so. Well, 2023 that would be, but we're working on another event that'll be taking place this fall as well. Maybe October, right around there, which I think a lot of our listeners will enjoy. So stay tuned on that point. We'll be getting back to in-person gatherings, since I think the last one we did was just before COVID. I think you were there at the brewery for the Blue State Ball.
Yes.
Yeah, just a few weeks before everything shut down. Wasn't it only like 2 weeks? I think it was late February.
Yeah, you have a good memory.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. That's, how many years ago was that now? 3?
Unbelievable. Yeah, just about 3.
Oh, my goodness. Because that 1 year, that COVID year, I call it the COVID year.
It was, yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
It's like a blur. It really is. It's like, what did I do? I stayed home. I made cakes. I learned how to bake. What did I do? I don't know. Oh, I learned to cook.
Yeah.
My husband picked up some hobbies. So because it was a very lonely time too. Because
Oh, it was, yeah.
aren't we very social people as human beings? And to be isolated is not normal, right?
No, no, yeah, it takes your toll on just about anyone. Yeah, so for me, I did a lot of biking during the pandemic, at least when it was warm outside, because as you said, you can't really have many big gatherings with friends or families at that point. So,
Yeah, that's why the Blue State Ball to me is such a great idea because maybe it can reunite our community, our our progressive community, and connect again with people. Because how I met you, and how I met Chad, and how I met everybody else, and I even go back to Norman Goldman. I mean, that's how
oh yeah,
many
I
years
love
ago
Norman,
I
yeah.
was going there, and who else was there at that time?
Well, you might have been going to the Blue State Ball before I even worked here then.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't think the first time I went, you were there. So it may have been
Yeah.
that second year I went.
Yeah, like 16 or 17 might have been my first year going to that. So,
Yeah.
but you're right. We do need to get back to doing those in-person events again, and yeah, get that
Because
stuff.
I have a picture with me and him, him and I should say. And so, yeah, it must have been, what year was that when he was around? I can't even.
I think he ended his show in, it was just before the 2020 cycle.
Okay.
I think.
All right.
Maybe 2019, right around there.
Okay.
Could be off on that.
But again, to bring, to
Yeah.
to reiterate, I think it's the most wonderful thing because you dance, you have a glass of wine or beer,
Right.
and you schmooze and you learn about, and if it wasn't for that connection, that venue where we met, I probably wouldn't even be doing this right now because, I got the seed planted in my brain when I got interviewed by another podcaster, and then when I spoke to Chad, he, was talking about podcasting and maybe this is a good, thing to do for the future, and so bring back the Blue State Ball.
I know. What I love about that, too, is that we
Yeah.
get a lot of politicians out there, too, that are just
Yes.
mingling around the floor. Like, I remember one of the years I was there, I think I happened to bump into someone, didn't think much of it, but then I turned around. Oh, yeah, that was Tim Walz that I bumped into. Of all
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my
Just
goodness.
accidentally, walking through, like, oh, yeah, he's just kind of hanging around the ballroom
Oh, that's
floor.
great. Yeah.
Same with Amy Klobuchar, too. Yeah, just, oh, yeah, get a photo with you. Oh, sure, absolutely.
I
So-
met Tom Hartman at a Blue
Yeah,
State
Tom
Ball.
Hartman's obviously, is at a lot of those. Yeah, hopefully we'll be getting him back next year at the Blue
What was
State
his
Ball.
name that was that Stauber when he stopped running?
Oh, Rick Nolan, yeah,
Rick Nolan. What a nice man. Yeah, I met
absolutely.
him.
Yeah, miss him having being
You know
an aide.
what? We lost that seat because I wish he could. He had family issues, I think, from what I remember him telling me. But he was such a great representative for that. And we're called the DFL for a reason. The Farm Labor Party, and how the people up there started to gravitate away from us. That's another issue unto itself. But
That's
anyway.
that's about a podcast series, not just an episode.
Yeah.
Talking
We
about
need
how
another hour
Yeah,
to do
no
that.
kidding, yeah.
Anyway, do you have any further aspirations to move beyond radio and maybe even run for political office? Why or why not?
Probably not for political office, I would think. I don't know. It's just something that, at least in this day and age, it's so exhausting to run for political office, even at the state legislative level, where, at least as of even probably 10 years ago, you could generally run with a lot of outside money coming into your campaign. But that's completely changed now, where running for even the state legislature is similar to running for Congress, where you have to raise bundles of money. And at least for me, I'm more of an introverted person, so I wouldn't be the biggest fan of having to go and door knock, around different places. But I think the other thing, too, is that what I've heard is that when you run for political office, you got to spend a lot of time fundraising, more than you probably think, which wouldn't be appealing to me. So anyone who runs for political office, either party, of course, mostly Democrats, although I'll be happy with some Republicans if they're actually running for the right reasons and not just to kiss up to Donald Trump. But I have respect for anyone who runs for office, just seeing how much work you have to put into that, and then also the amount of time you have to spend fundraising rather than probably doing what you intended to do, which is, out talking to constituents and trying to get your message out.
Yeah. But isn't it sad, though, when you think about it, that you have to be a personality? You have to have, like be an entertainer to be a politician. I mean, why not just be smart? Why
Right.
not know what you're doing? And You know what I mean? I mean, what happened to the good old days of just having a good old smart president, like FDR or LBJ. I love those three-letter presidents. They were good. But
Yeah, DJT doesn't work. Donald J. Trump. No. Yeah, those
no.
initials don't even work
No,
anyways.
I don't. I have other names for him, but we don't.
Yeah,
go there.
I could think of other initials for him as well.
Yeah, but no, but I mean, why do you have to be a TV personality, or do you, like Ronald Reagan was an actor,
Right.
or Donald Trump was whatever he was. What would you call him?
He just knew how to work the media,
Yeah,
essentially.
but he did have a show.
I guess The Apprentice, yeah.
Yeah, The Apprentice. Yeah,
And he has about a cameo in about 100 movies, too.
yeah. Home Alone, wasn't it?
Home Alone, yeah. He's been in a ton of them, yeah.
Yeah. But see, the thing is, I don't. Even Sonny Bono, he went into politics
that's
because
right.
he
I
was
forgot
a
about him,
famous
yeah.
person. Why can't we just have a smart person run for office? Somebody that has brains. They may not, be funny or entertaining, but they can right the ship.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of that?
I think you're right with that, and I don't know if there was a way in an idealist world, it would be nice to have a way where we could make it so politics wasn't something where you're automatically going to become a rich person if you go into politics.
Mm-hmm.
If you had to stay as a middle class person, or even a not middle class person, not necessarily an upper class person, I think that would certainly help, because I think when you run for office and you eventually win, you'll probably end up with a good, lobbying gig once you leave. So I think there's a lot of people that just are obviously in it for the money, unfortunately. And if we could separate money from politics in an idealist world, that would probably help towards getting people who are actually smart running for office. Because as you said, right now, it's all about celebrity and people who know how to work a crowd.
Yeah. And that's really unfortunate. I mean,
Right.
because I remember we had presidents like, what was his name? Jimmy Carter, for
Right.
example, who, I mean, he was as boring as could be, but I thought he was a good man. He had a good heart. Look, he's probably the most important effective post-president that we've ever had. I mean, look what he does for the Habitat for the Humanities, helping these people build homes in poor countries. He still teaches Sunday school. I mean, he's a good-hearted man, but he wasn't vivacious or like Ronald Reagan.
Right.
And I guess that, and then the economic situation at that time didn't help him either, with inflation. But his inflation was 10 times worse than this is.
It didn't help either with Reagan kind of screwing him over in 1980 when he was negotiating with the Iranians behind his back.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that didn't help him either.
No, and he actually sat down with, I think it was Menachem Begin, wasn't it? And Sadat, if I'm not mistaken, the heads of both Israel and Egypt, and got them to make peace with each other. And that was shocking to me, that a president would be able to accomplish that.
Mm-hmm.
That would be like us trying to get the Palestinians and the Israelis to, sit down and make peace. That was a big thing back then, But he wasn't an entertainer. He wasn't funny. He was just a regular guy who had good intentions.
Yeah, it's too bad we don't have presidents like that anymore that don't desire the office. Early days,
it's
kind of like even George Washington didn't want the office. He had to kind of be begged to run for president, and some of the early ones were like that too. But yeah, I guess Jimmy Carter was kind of the exception to the rule, because most people who run for office are doing it because they very much want to be president, not because they have some patriotic duty.
Yeah. Well, let's just hope that people, whoever the candidate's going to be, I don't know if it's going to be President Biden or Vice President Harris, Pete Buttigieg, whoever they're going to pick, I don't know. A lot of people are saying the governor of California may run.
Newsom. Yeah.
Newsom. I don't know. We'll see. But I think it all depends on what the atmosphere is at the time, whether it's, Biden is popular? Because right now he's still kind of hovering in the, what is he, in the low 40s?
Yeah, right around. Unfortunately, yeah, still in those low 40s, I think.
Yeah. But I'd take a paperclip at this point, rather than Trump. So
Yeah. I would at least my minimum requirement for being president. Do you believe whoever gets the most votes should be the winner of the president? Yes or no? Unfortunately, many Republicans would answer no to that question.
So if you had a paperclip or Donald Trump, you take the paperclip, basically.
Yeah, if the paperclip believed whoever got the most votes should win, I would go with the paperclip.
Exactly. Anyway, so now we've come to the part of the show I like to call the shift with an F. Shift. Where we shift the questioning away from our guest's occupation and his expertise, and we move on to his opinion of current events. Are you good with that?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Let's go for that. Okay. Now, I normally I like to, we do like national things, but I want to, since you're a Minnesotan like I am, we'll start with local politics. How's that?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. If heaven forbid Governor Walz's opponent wins the election in November.
Oh, you're giving me a nightmare scenario here to kick us
off. Already. Yeah. Other than his promise to ban abortion in Minnesota, can you list some other dangerous consequences that would result should he prevail? Well, what else do you think he would promote or do?
Scott Jensen is a guy that I would not be happy with running or winning the governor's mansion, because here's an interesting story about Scott Jensen. I don't know if you remember a guy named Hunter Haas, who used to work for AM950 a while back.
Yes.
He actually had an interview with Scott Jensen on AM950 as soon as I think like maybe even 4 or 5 years ago, not that long ago. And at that point, Scott Jensen was actually a very reasonable and moderate Republican who had some good stances on trying to make insulin affordable, was even somewhat friendly to the idea of, not being completely anti-LGBTQ rights. But I think what's happened to him over the years, especially during the Trump era, is that you have someone who is just thirsting for power and will essentially do anything to get into that office. So,
yeah, that's what I'm guessing about him.
Yeah, so that's what would really make me fearful of having someone like that in office, is that you're bringing someone in that really doesn't have any values. They're just there to win. Even though if you look at the actual policy positions of how Scott Jensen used to be, he's not that bad of a politician. But now all of a sudden, as he's trying to run to the far right, and as you said, wants to ban abortion, of course, was pushing some quack theories about how to combat COVID. I mean, that's, to me, the type of person who will say or do anything to be elected to office. And yeah, that's not someone that we should probably have in the governor's mansion, especially because I even remember when I hosted FYI Politics, I would bring up, Scott Jensen, one of the more reasonable Republicans we have in the legislature, and now that not true at all.
Yeah.
Did
you watch that little debate he had with Governor Walz? Where was it again?
I think it was Farm Fest.
The Farm Fest. Yeah. Yep. Did you take a gander at that?
I didn't get a chance to watch any of it. We had a guy who was filling in.
Don't.
Good. Okay. Fortunately, I go with what our guest host Todd Nicholson was talking about with that at that time. Yeah.
You would definitely need to have a few drinks after you watch that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Really, yeah. Scary. It's just basically, like you said, he's very ambitious. He's going
good way to describe it. Yeah,
try
ambitious.
Anything he can to win, and yeah. Anyway, so as you know, the biggest news story of today by far is the FBI searching the former president's residence in Florida. Now we're going on national news, obviously, because we just tackled that last thing. How do you feel that the party of so-called law and order? See, in New York we say law, and now I have to say law. Law and order is demonizing the FBI and wanting to defund them. Now, remember, the GOP is supposed to be the party of law and order. They didn't want to defund the police and all this stuff. But now they want to defund the FBI, which is basically the entity that will protect this country from any espionage, any terrorism or anything. What do you feel about that? What is your opinion?
Well, with Republicans wanting to say defund the FBI, I say keep going with that campaign slogan because
That's not working.
unfortunately we saw how that defund the police slogan ended up hurting Democrats down ballot in 2020. Even though a lot of Democrats weren't necessarily for defunding the police, Republicans were still able to take clips out of context.
Well,
and
Brett,
use...
I hate to interrupt you, but I think the problem is Democrats don't know how to verbalize what they
Right.
want. They use these stupid terms like defund. What would have been better would have been to say improve the police.
That's a great idea. I think I
The
spent
word
a show with...
improve sounds better than defund, doesn't it?
I wish you would have called NWAC when I hosted the show. I think we did a whole episode on what's a better
Oh,
what's
you
a
did?
better way to describe defund the police. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, improve.
We had some good ones, but I like improve the police. Yes.
Yeah. Make them a better entity where they can help the community in a psychological way. Having more social workers help them out, and because defund kind of says you want to take the money out and let them die. Let the whole thing go to pot. But we don't want that. We want police. If somebody's robbing your house, you want to call somebody. So I think we have to learn how to put into words what we mean.
Dems, I think, are getting a little better at that. When at least someone says, "Are you for defunding the police?" They're at least saying immediately no.
No.
Yeah, and they're at least kind of getting into what you're talking about, saying, "Here's how we need to improve the police." I got to start saying that now.
Improve the police, and but let the Republicans say they want to defund the FBI.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to be hearing Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, I want to improve the FBI.
No.
Or Matt Gaetz or anyone else.
No,
So I would say,
no.
It's a horrible thing to say, but from the political perspective of hopefully thinking that maybe it will get Republicans not elected, I say keep saying that, Republicans. Keep saying defund the FBI. Yeah.
And the thing is, with Hillary Clinton, with her emails, she just mishandled them. She used the wrong server. She didn't take documents home.
I don't think she had classified nuclear documents
Top
either.
secret.
Yeah.
Supposedly, you're right. I'm hearing they're nuclear documents. If they get in the hands of the wrong people, this is very dangerous for our country.
Knowing a grifter like Trump, he probably was going to sell it to the
Sell them
highest
to
bidder.
make money. Yeah.
Or the other thing I think, too, is that he's such a show-offy kind of guy. He would say, "You won't believe the nuclear programs we have in the United States. You don't believe me? Let me show you what I got."
Yeah, it's scary.
Because he
It really
can't
is.
keep his big mouth shut.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, not even necessarily selling. I could see if he has some foreign diplomat or president there thinking, well, you don't think our nuclear weapons are good? Let me show you what we have.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'll just show you the nuclear codes while I'm at it. Yeah.
But the elephant in the room, Brett, is why did he have to take them home with him? Like what's the purpose of that? Right?
He's above the law, and he probably wants a trophy. Yeah, saying, look at all these documents
that's got
I
a lot
have.
to do with it.
Or
Yeah.
maybe the scary one, as we brought up, he wanted to sell them too.
Yeah.
Or he's got something that he was hiding there too.
I think that's probably why they took his passport, because they probably thought he was a flight risk.
Yeah, yeah. You called in the other day to the Matt McNeil show. Yeah, I like that. Yeah,
that
he's
was
a flight
me.
risk. Yeah.
He's a flight risk.
Yeah.
I said no. I think I said to Matt, I said, I have two words about what happened in Mar-a-Lago: flight risk.
Yeah.
Because, the only reason I could think of is maybe at the time they thought he was going to take those documents and maybe bring them overseas to his friend Vladimir, who probably would like to see them, right?
Yeah. Here's another thing too. He said my passports were stolen. Who has more than one passport?
Yeah. What is that about?
I would think a United States passport would be all you need. So that's kind of weird too.
Did anybody ever follow up questioning him about what he meant by the plural form of passport?
Yeah.
Maybe he has a Russian passport too. Who knows?
Cayman Islands where he's hiding money. Yeah, who knows?
Cayman. Yeah, exactly. So what's your reaction? Well, obviously the other big news story that I want to bring up today is what is your reaction to Wyoming Representative Liz Cheney losing her primary to a Trump-backed candidate, and why do you think many Americans aren't afraid of the country becoming a fascist autocracy?
Oh, I think as long as you have social media keeping people in their echo chamber, probably why people aren't necessarily fearful of that, even though they're voting for very, as you said, fascist candidates who, if they're not fascist, they're certainly kind of cosplaying as being fascists and pretending to be one, which is still awfully dangerous. But yeah, when it comes to Liz Cheney, I don't think she's necessarily sad about losing. I think she's trying to position herself for beyond 2024. She might run in 24, obviously won't beat Trump in the primary, but
Well, she'll bring him down a few pegs, though.
Bring him down a few pegs and I think try to set herself up for being the post-Republican Trump. Not necessarily being another Donald Trump, but like the future Republican when he's gone, because Trump does not look like he's in necessarily the best of health. And I'm hoping I'm right when I say this, that if the next two elections, 22 and 24, don't go well for Republicans, that maybe they'll start to move away from him a little bit. I think I heard someone say once about the Republican Party right now, half of them would follow Donald Trump off a cliff and the other half would push him off, but they're just too scared to.
Yeah, but Brett, this is nobody's really talking about this, and this wasn't a prepared question, but I just want to get your input. So Donald Trump is a person. Mm-hmm. Trumpism is an idea. And if you eliminate Trump, the Trumpism is still going to be there. You got DeSantis, you have Hawley, you have all these other scary human beings who believe in Trumpism. So even if you get rid of the cancer, you're still going to have some of it spreading anyway throughout our governance. And I'm scared that somebody that's more palatable, if they want to use that term, like DeSantis or Hawley, even though they're not palatable to me, but could win, and then you get those issues, like anti-abortion and all these other policies passed anyway. Mm-hmm. Build the wall, throw out the Muslims, all these awful things, stop gay people from marrying, stop birth control, people being able to get birth control, all the way down the line. What is your opinion of that? What do you think of that idea?
I think at least we're getting more politically activated on the progressive side, where I think they would still be just as fearful as of someone like DeSantis or whoever else might take on the Republican mantle. Because I think you're right that Trumpism is going to live on, even if he's gone. But I think at least enough people are fearful of Trumpism now and seeing what it brings that people still might stay engaged, especially with the abortion issue. I think that's one that until it gets solved and at least the overturning of Roe versus Wade gets overturned yet again and reinstated, I think that's going to be an issue that's going to motivate people for a long, long time. It may not have a huge impact. It might in 2022, but I think that's an issue that's going to just continue to be in the front of our minds politically. So I'm at least hopeful that, an issue like that will keep people engaged in fighting, not just Trump, but Trumpism.
Well, look at Kansas.
Yeah.
I mean, God. I mean, you're not talking about Vermont. You're talking about Kansas.
Yeah.
Kansas. I mean, when I saw that, I was like, I didn't expect that. Believe me, that's the biggest shock to the system that I ever experienced in recent years, that a state like Kansas, which you would think that, they're all Republicans, they're probably all, anti-abortion, they voted in such almost 60% of the populace wanted to keep abortion legal. Crazy, right?
Yeah, in Kansas. But I think, there's people who, if you frame it as a healthcare issue or it's a healthcare procedure.
It is a healthcare issue.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you there. That's what I think.
I think we got to stop talking about it. Like, see, this is what I mean about words. Mm-hmm. The Democrats don't use the proper words. What we should say is abortion healthcare or abortion care or women's care or, I can't think of a word off the top of my head, but something like that rather than just the word abortion.
Yeah.
Because I think that's become a taboo word, unfortunately. Anyway, so finally, even though President Biden has the slimmest of majorities in the Senate, he was able to pass into law in no particular order. I'm going to list all these things for the people who say he's doing a horrible job. I just want to clear the record here. The American Rescue Plan, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, Juneteenth National Independence Day Act, Veterans Burn Pits Relief, the Semiconductor Chip Bill, approving Sweden and Finland admittance into NATO, the Health, Climate, and Tax Bill, and so many more. I can go on. There's actually more, but I just wanted to give our listeners a little synopsis of what this man has accomplished with a very, very slim. It's not even a majority. It's 50-50. Right. If it wasn't for Vice President Harris, none of these things would have passed. So why, in your opinion, do you think, in spite of all of those things I've just enumerated, his approval ratings are so low? Why?
I think it's just we're in such a cynical society right now, or I don't know if we're ever going to have a day where a president, at least in the near future, where a president is going to have an approval rating above 50%. I think there's people, even among the base of the president's own supporters, whether it's a Republican or Democrat, are going to say, I wish that person would be doing more. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to see how 2022 plays out because, as you said, even though Biden's approval numbers are low, I still don't necessarily think that those people who disapprove of him are going to automatically go and vote Republicans. I think still,
I hope not.
A lot of them are still very much against what the Republicans are for and will probably still end up voting for Democrats. I just think a lot of people just see chaos of what's happening right now, and they're just thinking, well, I don't like whoever is the president right now. Things are chaotic. Things aren't going well. It's just, I think, the symptom of being a very cynical society sometimes when it comes to politics, at least what I kind of think of why his numbers are still down, even though, as you said, it's a miracle he's accomplished all that stuff with bare majorities. I mean, there's no way Republicans would be able to do that with bare majorities when they have that crazy loon caucus, led by, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, and others. So,
oh, my goodness. Yeah.
So, I mean, Democrats should get more credit for getting done what they've done with slim majorities because you have to have everyone on board. And we've seen how tough that can be for both parties to do, especially Republicans.
I have an opinion, and maybe you can either add to it, agree, disagree. I'm thinking it's not that they don't like President Biden. I just don't think when they ask, do you want him to run again, they say no. Democrats say no. And I'm going to give you the reason I think is because he's too old. And I don't want to be an ageist because I'm 62 years old myself. And I'm pretty compos mentis myself. But, he looks much healthier than Trump does. I mean, at least Trump doesn't need help to go down a ramp. Well, I mean, I'm just telling you, and he doesn't need another hand to lift his glass to drink water, But what do you think of that? Do you think that's the reason, basically, that Democrats are skeptical about him running again because of his age?
Yeah, that's a good point to bring up. Yeah, just the whole idea that he's old, and if you look at Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, they're not exactly.
She's 80, yeah, and I don't know how old is Chuck?
He's got to be in his at least mid-60s, I would think. I have to look it up.
No, I'm going higher.
You think he's higher? yeah. I might be optimistic on Chuck Schumer's
part. Because I'm 62, and I know he's older than me. So, because he was my senator when I lived in New York.
Oh, you're right. He's got to be in his 70s.
I met him when he first won. Mm-hmm. So that's back in the day, and he was older than me then. So I still think he's older than me.
Yeah, he's probably in his 70s. So I think you might be onto something there, where people say,
"Yeah,
well,
I think we need."
I don't like Republicans, but these guys are all so old, and think of like their own parents or grandparents, thinking, "Well, I see what a vulnerable state they can be in sometimes. When you get to an older age, I don't want that type of person in office."
Yeah, and not because I'm LGBT. And please don't, I hope my listeners, I keep saying this over and over. I like Pete Buttigieg, not because he's LGBT. I like people say, oh, you like him because he's a gay man. Okay, no. Because if he was didn't believe in abortion and he didn't want to help the poor and all this stuff, I wouldn't support him. I like his intelligence. I like the fact that he's young. I'm an older guy, and I look at him and I go, and he was in the military, so they can't get him on that he was, he didn't go fight in Afghanistan. So, and there are a lot of other, like Gavin Newsom, like we were mentioning before. He's a young guy. I mean, why not him step up? He step up, or Beto O'Rourke. But he's got enough trouble down in Texas right now. So, what do you? Again, don't you think that age is a little bit of a factor sometimes?
I think so, and yeah, at least being someone who hasn't been in Washington for years and years, like it's kind of crazy if you think about who's been the Democratic nominee for president. I think it's always been a senator for like the past 30 years. It's never been someone who's not been a senator. Probably going back to Bill Clinton now.
Other than Donald Trump, though.
Yeah, well, I'm going just on the Democratic side. Yeah.
Oh, on the okay.
Yeah, Republicans are a little better at nominating non-senators. Not that they're necessarily good candidates or.
We had a governor run. Clinton was a governor.
Yeah.
Who else?
I think Bill Clinton was the last Democratic nominee we had that wasn't a senator, and I think that goes to your point where generally people who are senators are going to be older people who are getting up there in years, and people sometimes maybe just want a fresh face in Washington or in the White House. So
because the old thought when I was growing up is that senators are legislators. Yeah. And governors are in the executive branch. They're much more in charge of everything. And that's why governors were always looked upon as, presidential material rather than senators. But lately our senators are the ones stepping ahead and, making a stand, which is, see how times are changing? It's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you might be onto something there with the idea of just age and too much Washington experience where, people have soured so much on Washington. Yeah, they might just want someone. We want somebody else in there that, is not connected to Washington.
Well, you know what, Brett, it's been such a pleasure having you on the Downright Upright Show. I am so, first of all, full disclosure, you've been helping my podcast since its inception, since episode 1, when I talked about myself. And now this is episode 9, and it's moving along really well, and I have you to thank. And I love to pick your brain. And if you ever want to do this again, we could talk about other things. I would love it because you are just like a plethora of information. I mean, I learned so much today, I can't begin to tell you. So thank you for coming on the show.
No problem. It's been fun, absolutely.
Yeah. And for more about Brett, obviously just come to AM950 website, and I'm sure some of your shows will pop up there from time to time.
I still have the archives of my shows on there, and you'll be able to catch me on Matt's show as well, or others,
That's where I heard you yesterday. That's why I called you.
Yeah, I'm on some of the weekend shows too, so if you listen to anything on AM950, you'll probably hear my voice at some point.
Good. And to our listeners, we want to thank you for spending time with us today, and please stay tuned for more of the Downright Upright Show in the future. And ciao for now. Bye now, Chad. Chad. I'm calling you Chad. Thank you, Chad, for giving me this opportunity. That's what I meant to say.
That's a recovery right there. There we go.
And thank you, Brett, again. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.